Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. That's my great pleasure being with all of you here today. You know, digital and AI disruptive models, a great topic. And I think if we have all in mind, you know, the different transformation the shipping industry moved through, you know, since the 90s along the different industrial revolutions, I think the main difference today is that the current transformation, you know, goes fast, much faster than the previous ones. Just imagine, you know, a container ship navigating through the ocean at night, no captain on the bridge, no crew in the machinery spaces, and AI, you know, adjusting the route in real time, optimizing the fuel consumption, communicating, you know, with ports hundreds of miles away, and centralized fleet and ship management team, you know, watching, you know, from 1,000 miles away, but supporting, advising, and directing the ship. This may not be longer science fiction, you know. We have already, as we speak, a few pilot projects. But the real question is, are we simply digitizing the shipping? Or are we transforming, you know, the entire global value chain that depends on that? Because shipping, as you know well, does not operate in isolation. It sits at the heart of a vast ecosystem from the energy production, manufacturing, and commodities to ports, coordination, and final delivery. And today, that entire system, you know, is being reshaped by digitalization, AI, energy transition, you know, we just heard about it, and unfortunately, geopolitics. As we all know, shipping is a critical component in the supply chain. You know, it moves more than 90% of the global trade, but more importantly, it underpins, you know, the entire ocean economy, which is worth trillions and spans, you know, energy, food, and infrastructure. So we are not just, you know, modernizing the ships themselves. We are developing, you know, interconnected systems. Meaning the maritime transformation is not about a single breakthrough. There is no single fuel solution, no single digital platform, no single actor, you know, can solve this alone. Instead, transformation, you know, is systematic, collaborative, and pragmatic. And of course, driven by three main forces: decarbonization, digitalization, and resilience, you know. So the conclusion is simple. The maritime industry is moving from fragmented optimization to connected intelligence across the full value chain. Well, traditionally, we looked at ships, you know, as standalone assets. But it's not. It's not. Today, we must look at, you know, end-to-end value chains and their sustainability for energy production, ship design and construction, operations of the ships, port and terminals, all about logistics, and last but not least, the end users, the consumers, you know, the customers. So shipping is both dependent, but as well a strong drive of, you know, the wider global economy transformation. And this is absolutely critical in the way we approach the solutions. Why? Because 2/3 of oil and most coal trade internationally is transported by sea. Why? Because decarbonizing, you know, shipping depends on decarbonizing the energy systems and vice versa. So this is why we now see the efforts to build the green corridors. There were some discussions about that in the morning, but as well cross-industry collaboration and a focus on more integrated digital platforms enabled, you know, by AI. And this is why AI, must become very, very powerful. Not just upon the ships, but across the entire supply chains. So I think we're all convinced that AI is not just replacing, the maritime expertise. It's augmenting, the decision-making process onshore and offshore. So the future of shipping will be co-written, between the humans and the artificial intelligence. Today, AI is already delivering, impact across the value chain. On board the vessels, as you can read here, optimization, of the vessel, predictive maintenance, real-time performance monitoring, but as well on the design, and the engineering side. Digital twins, simulating thousands of configurations, AI-driven hydrodynamics optimizations, and so on. But as well across the supply chains, predictive delay modeling, dynamic routing, weather forecast, demand forecast, etc., etc. And last but not least, in the ports and logistics, berth optimization, automatic, handling systems, integrated planning, etc., etc. But there is one key insight here. AI, is valuable and works if data, is dependable, structured, and trusted. And that brings us, to a fundamental shift. One of the most profound, transformation is happening in our business, as a class society. Traditionally, ships were inspected, periodically. Decisions were based, on snapshots. Now, that's a big shift. We are moving toward a more continuous service system, data-driven assurance system. At BV and most of the class societies, this is what we call digital class, integrating design, construction, and operations, and using the twins, as a shared reference, and enabling, at the top of that, the real-time monitoring instead of periodical checks. That's what we used to call the digital twin. And that changes, everything in terms of transparency, in terms of decision-making, but as well, of course, in risk detection. And technologies, as our augmented surveyor 3D, show how this works, in practice. The drone-based inspections, but now, the analytics with the AI-supported defect detection, digital 3D model, but maybe most importantly, and from the discussions, raised by Arsenio, AI does not replace the experts, of course. It empowers them. So human judgment, remains at the center of that, of course. Talking about AI, I need to say a few words about what we call, the smart chip concept, which shows, how the digital transformation, evolves in different stages. Connected chips, augmented chips, autonomous functions, fully integrated ecosystem. So you have here different degrees, of AI integration. But the key lesson, from our current experience is that there's no one-size-fits-all, solution. Integration is a challenge. And it's all the more important that we all know that today the industry is fragmented, multi-technology at uneven maturity levels. So clearly the success will depend on the interoperability, standardization, and collaboration across the different stakeholders. And that's why, in the class world, we are actively involved in the IMO digital standards, ISO data frameworks, and as well all about, industry-wide data harmonization initiatives. Because without any shared standards, the transformation, does not and cannot happen. Digitalization, is strongly connected to decarbonization, where I think it's important to think big given the challenge ahead of us, but executing, with pragmatism. Why? Simple reasons. The fleet, is long life, 20 to 30 years. Technologies are evolving fastly, and the investment decisions are high risk here. So there's no silver bullet, there are no magic wands, but we need a system transformation. By system, I mean new fuels, new infrastructure, new financing models. And by operational pragmatism, I mean voyage optimization, energy-saving devices, AI-driven, performance improvements, a certain number of enablers. You heard a lot about it. But to say here that the digital transformation, the digital optimization alone can deliver significant emission reductions today. So without waiting for the future fuels. So we can act right now. And this is how we can make the bridge, between the today's fleet to the tomorrow's net zero emissions. But good to keep in mind that when we talk about digitalization, there is a certain level of complexity and risk by definition. Namely the cybersecurity, threats which are increasing. All the more we are dependent, on digital. The data ownership as well, which is still unresolved. And of course, the regulatory framework which are evolving today. Cybersecurity, for example, is now mandatory under class rules, applicable, to the ships, reflecting how critical, it has become for safe operations. But beyond the technology, the challenge for class societies, but let me say for all, the maritime stakeholders, is the trust. The trust, you give to the data. The trust you give, to the different algorithm. The trust you give to the hardware. So can we trust AI decisions? Can we trust emissions data? Can we trust digital systems across the borders? And this is where, with humility, let me say the role of independent third parties becomes essential. Not just to certify the compliance, it's much beyond than that, but validate the data, de-risk the innovation, enable the investment, just bringing confidence. So just to clarify a little bit how, our roles and responsibilities, within the class society evolves today, it's really, from design, dismantling, across now the full life cycle of the assets. So we act as a connective tissue, across the value chain, working with the different stakeholders, ship owners, shipyards, ports, energy players, financials, traders, charterers, supporting, both maritime and upstream industries, and bridging, the physical and the digital worlds. So the role is evolving here from more compliance duties to enabling transformation through digital classification, advisory, data-driven performance insight, and cross-industry collaboration platforms. Why? Because transformation, requires trusted coordination across the different ecosystems. So to conclude, on that setup, I think we are definitely at an inflection point. But shipping has always adapted, you know, from sail to steam, from steel to digital. So let me say, no worries. But today, the transformation is a little bit different, as I said earlier. This is systemic, data-driven, and deeply interconnected within the global economy. So the conviction is that the future will not be defined by a single technology. It will be defined by our global ability, you know, to collaborate across industries, integrate the systems, and build trust in the digital world. So the question is not whether digital transformation and AI will reshape maritime. I think the question is more how fast and how well, you know, we navigate it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dechene. Next up is a panel discussion where our speakers will build on the insights and explore their implications for the industry. May we now invite our session moderator, Mr. Nakul Malhotra, Vice President, Emerging Opportunities, Wilhelmsen, up on stage, please. Joining Mr. Malhotra are our panelists, Mr. Patrick Ryan, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, ABS. Mr. Francois Xavier Akha, Managing Director, CME CGM International Shipping Company. Mr. Chakib Abisab, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, Lloyd's Register. And Mr. T.S. Teo, President, Singapore Shipping Association. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Okay, fantastic. Let me just say a quick thank you to Matthew. I think that set the scene really well for what we want to debate, just in terms of grounding us to the stark realities of the challenges and complexities of shipping. I'm going to push my panelists now to maybe just be a little bit more creative, a little bit more forward-thinking, but we have a existential question that we're going to have to try and answer, or at least have a position on, and that is digital transformation and AI, emphasis on AI. Is it a strategic imperative, or is it yet another expensive experiment? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined today with a phenomenally qualified, very competent panel. I know we're going to have a lot of excellent conversations, but just conscious of the time and the size of the topic, I think the way we'll do introductions, if it's okay with you guys, is as we go through the questions, the first time you're speaking, just introduce yourselves to give a context rather than going around as a general introduction. And so let's get straight to it. And just because of age, give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. Francois, I'm going to start with you. Just as a major carrier, and remember, introduce yourself a little bit better than I'm doing. How does CMA CGM actually decide when a pilot is ready to scale? And let me contextualize that just a little bit more. The last couple of years, we've been talking a lot about this requirement to move from exploration and piloting and testing to bringing some value, doing something a little bit larger, something more interesting. So I guess the first question is, are you seeing anything that's moving from pilot to scale? And the second one is, how do you decide when it's ready to scale?
So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the first question. So indeed, Francois Xavier Accard from CMA CGM. So CMA CGM, we are a liner company, container carrier. A bit of context here that will help. So our group is divided in three major categories. We have shipping, logistic, and now we have media. So digitalization of the whole group is a real challenge. And if I go into a bit more details, so in terms of shipping, we are talking about today 405 vessels. We are talking about 177 countries that are being called. We are talking about more than 400 ports, 400 offices, and in terms of logistic, more than 1,000 warehouses. So when we need to implement something, we cannot fail. So indeed, we start with pilots. And well, straight away referring to the question, is it expensive? When you have this scale, it can be. Talking just about the vessels, so for 100 vessels, if for implementing a pilot, you have to spend 1,000 or 2,000 USD to send someone to adjust, to add the sensor, on the fleet, it will be a check of nearly 1 million that we have to spend. So indeed, pilots are key in exploring, experimenting, and indeed we started along this route a few years ago, and there are indeed some benefits that we can see already. Our vessels are now being delivered with a concept similar to Mathieu was mentioning just before, smart ship, collecting data, allowing us to get to collect data from the engine, from the navigation, and then work on routing optimization from vessel efficiency, helping the crew on board to be more efficient. So today we see a progress, but it's still not we still haven't reached a full maturity, because all along the path, we see that data is really key, and things that were maybe initially not expected is that all these sensors that we added on board, all this data that we are collecting, it was fantastic at the beginning. We had a lot of data, and then we started to see some data, but what is this data exactly? It's not what we were expecting. It's out of the scope, and now we have a lot of cleaning of data to do. So we see some progress, but new challenge along the road, and yeah. So basically, that's it.
That's interesting. TS, I want to bring you in, and remember, introduce yourself as well when you're answering here. Just given your role and, of course, all of your experience in the industry, are we seeing a gap, or how would you describe the gap between kind of the theater part of innovation and, you know, a lot of the declarations that are made versus actual operational impact? And I'm conscious in your role in SSA, you get to hear a lot of feedback and developments, both from large companies, but also smaller companies. If you could maybe...
I'm T.S. Teo. I'm president of Singapore Shipping Association. I'm with Pacific International Lines. We got quite a bit of advertisement mileage this morning from the opening address. The adoption of AI, if I may call it, is very diverse. You know, you're a large company, you have small companies. Contrary to the fact that you say that the big companies may be faster, but when it comes to executing AI, big companies will be more complex because they're multinational. In terms of the application today, the quickest way, of course, will be third-party applications where you have AI embedded, right? You have route optimization, you're preventing maintenance. But if you put the third party aside, in terms of adopting AI, it is still very rudimentary. And if for maritime, right? So I foresee it will still take a while. And the other issue would be, how do you ensure its success? Because there are failures, and the failure rates can be quite high.
Well, that's interesting. Chakib, I saw you pick up the mic.
Yeah, let me add something. First, I'm Chakib, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for Lloyd's Register and Chairman of Safety Tech Accelerator. So let me bring some of the points very quickly through that questions about what we are seeing from reality versus fiction. There is a lot of talk about AI, and we are starting to see many organizations implementing AI to help you do what you do today faster. But the reality is that we have a problem in the industry. Number one is we have not fixed the basics. You can't have proper AI if you do not have the right data, which you did mention. Number two is that organizations want to implement AI on the chip. And what that means is that you hear everyone talking about AI. Every conference I attend, everyone talks about AI, the importance of AI. But when you ask what percentage of your technology investment is going to that, what you find is that it's minimal. So unless we change that, it is not going to happen. Number two is that technologists themselves are shooting themselves in the foot, because we are promising the sky and heaven with AI solutions. And when they are delivered, even if they are successful, because they will not have all these fictitious, fantastic achievements that we promised, then those implementations are seen as failures. So don't get me wrong, there is a lot of progress, there has been a lot of a good work done by some organizations, but the reality is that it's a small minority, and we need to really start putting the money where our ambitions are.
Thanks, Shakib. I think that's really interesting because two things struck me. One is, given the relative recency of the AI topic, I don't think I've ever seen a maritime conference that responds for such a recent technology topic, bringing it so early in the agenda and in such a sort of a highlighted context. And I think that's one indicator in terms of how the industry is changing. I think the second thing that you touched on, which I thought was really, really quite important, is because I personally have as well went on this little bit of this roller coaster journey on AI, amazing innovation, AI, all-inclusive solution for absolutely everything, AI, artificial intelligence, and now I'm trying to figure out what it actually means. Ryan, Patrick, I want to come to you. We've heard a little bit from I guess the owner dimensions, and obviously returns are important. But from your context and from ABS's context, and please remember to introduce yourself as well. How are you guys helping companies think about the security and the safety aspect of it, and also think about what does good look like? Coming back to TS's point, how should they think about returns and trying to invest in this technology landscape?
Yeah, thanks, Nakul. Patrick Ryan, Chief Technology Officer, American Bureau of Shipping, so I'm responsible for R&D globally for ABS. Kind of at the heart of everything class does is safety. And I think when we're talking about AI, there are certainly applications where you can use the technology for safety purposes, for safety outcomes. And I think when we think about any of the technologies or the use cases for AI, you start with outcomes. What are you trying to achieve? To kind of reflect on some of the earlier thoughts, when you decide to scale from prototype to full scale, the bottom line tells you when you go do that. Okay? Relative to where does safety fit in? Yes, you have safety outcomes that you would use AI for. We use it for, we call it condition-based class. I think Matthew, in the opening remarks, called it digital class. We've been doing this pre-COVID, pre-ChatGPT release, using natural language processing as a way to look at noon reports and apply that as an application to assess the condition of the hull and the condition of the machinery aboard the hull. Was an early application of natural language processing, or NLP. It's a safety application, certainly. But when you look at the technology itself, I think what we really need to talk about is trust. When you think about AI and you think about how can it be applied safely, what you're really talking about is how can I ensure that I can make a decision or let an agentic solution make a decision that relies on a safer operation of the vessel. And it comes down to data, I heard earlier, yes, 100%, right? Understanding, and that jump from prototype to scale really depends on the status of that data. But what the chief engineer at ABS, my counterpart, what we all care about is, are we making good choices, and can we trust what the AI is delivering to us? So I think the way I would answer your question, where does safety fit? It fits in that trusted part of the AI solution.
That's interesting. I just want to quickly remind the audience that we do have the pigeonhole system, so if you have any questions or indeed you want to ask the panelists something specific, please do use the system and we get it up here on the iPad and I can bring those questions forward later. TS, I'm conscious of some of the responses, and I think, again, just given your exposure to the range of, let's say, the size of companies through the Shipping Association, we're talking about decisions being made by agentic AI models. We're talking about it can be safer, it can be incorporated, it can scale, kind of a grassroots, ground level reality. Do you see people handing over trust to machines in that way?
I think they don't even understand what AI is, what the speed of development, what Gen AI is, what even agentic AI is, and what's next. So not having this on the board level will make it very difficult for a company to move. It has to be top down. But on the other hand, as you know, AI impacts all parts of your company. At the same time, it's evolving. So it becomes even more complex, right? All the skill set required, you need a strategy for something that is evolving and uncertain. You need plans that's rolling plans. So all this that's required makes it very challenging for the company, especially the smaller ones, to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I think TS makes good points, right? It's very important to have good plans and have a strategy. But I would also offer to everyone in the audience that this technology is moving really fast. And it may be better to put in place frameworks than necessarily plans or strategies that predict where you need to be in a certain amount of time, because it becomes unpredictable with AI. And so really what you, I think, want to empower your workforce, empower your crews, empower the industry at large, is how can you use these tools and move along with the pace that technology is moving along with in a safe and in trusted way. And if you think that you can plan what you can do next with AI, you probably have a better crystal ball and imagination than I do, because I think it's actually quite an unpredictable technology as it's advancing so fast.
Yeah, I think there are two types of AI. There is the AI that indeed we have been using for some time, that is here to help us do things more efficiently, more quickly, help us in filling up an Excel file or this kind of thing. And then there is AI that will need a change of mindset, a change of system, a change of processes. And referring to what you were mentioning about in this event having AI at the forefront, is that here really in Singapore, MPA and SSA as well really understood that AI is coming. It's really more than a wave, a tsunami, and if you miss this bus, then you might stay on the side of the road. So, and TSTO with SSA is doing a wonderful job on that, on trying to educate and to train the industry. I'm even sending some of my guys to SSA training, because we really need to be aware of what's going on, and indeed it's moving super fast. So while we are working on our development, things are still continue to move, and we still need to keep to stay aware of the latest development.
One minor comment, Nakul. First, I agree with everything that was said. I always look at it not as a technology adoption, but are we willing to change the operating model of the organization to truly take advantage of technology? Because what happens today is that we have a way of working and we try to accommodate technology here and there. But the reality is that only 1% is truly transforming the way they work, so we can take advantage of these new technologies. And that's where we need to focus.
So, yeah, sorry. It's important to work with business in the organization, because they have the one to understand that, okay, they want to go to point A from point A to point B, but it will be a different route now. They will have to change the way really they work, and they will have to adapt. So sometimes now the let's say IT department need to have a good communication skill and to be able to convince a business to understand they have to change. They really have to adapt.
Yeah. First of all, I love the interaction and conversation, so that's absolutely fantastic. But a lot of what I'm hearing is that I'm sort of getting the impression that this is a short-term cost driver, and we can't run away from that, and the returns will come. Is that an unfair characterization?
Yes.
Good. Tell me more.
So the reason that you invest in AI is to save money and to become more efficient. So yes, there can be pilots that can be expensive to set up, and what really should be done first can be an expensive proposition, and that is cleaning up your data. Okay? If you want to have good, effective AI systems, you need to start there. That can be an expensive proposition. But once you start developing pilots, and you're going to start seeing efficiencies, once you start letting your people use large language models at some scale, and they can produce reports or proposals or things more quickly, and you're going to start to see it on the bottom line. And that was my original comment when I said, how do you determine when you go from pilot to scale? You'll see it on the bottom line. And once you start to see those things, that's, AI is expensive. It may be expensive to start, but if you're a company operating in 2026, and you see yourself as having a digital heartbeat, and you're not using AI, it's going to be very expensive for you very quickly.
Even to maintain relevance, perhaps.
That's what I'm getting at.
Nakul, I think one of the mistakes, in my opinion, that many organizations make is they look at AI purely from the cost lenses. Now, cost matters, I fully agree. At the same time, it's about consistency, enabling you to make better, faster decisions now and in the future. So there is a lot more than just cost efficiencies. And one of the challenges is that some of these are very difficult to quantify. It's like asking the question, what is the ROI of using the internet? So clearly cost matters, but we need to think beyond that.
Absolutely. TS, please.
That's why it's so important to really know what AI is. Use the word game changer. What can be game changer today? And if you really understand what AI can do and what it can do in future, it really blows your mind. And then you realize you have to take on the journey. It is a journey, and it may not be simple, and it may not give you the return immediately. And you have to look at long term.
I think that's great because you've sort of really nicely teed up one of the elements that I wanted to touch on, which is actually the workforce, the human element side of this. And I know that MPA SSA MOU is being signed this week, or perhaps already done, around AI conversant skills that maritime workforce needs to focus on. And I think what you're touching on is really around that. One is to build awareness, but the second is to be able to set the foundation for people to even begin that journey, get on that journey, get excited by that journey. And one of the things that come to my mind always is move away from this is bad for me, it's going to replace me, to this makes me a lot better, smarter, faster. Tell me a little bit more about the MOU and how you're thinking about the skill set aspect.
Fortunately, it cannot replace us for now. It can always augment. It is a companion. That is the basic belief, I think, from most. With the MOU with MPA, what we believe the industry needs a cocktail of skill sets. It's not just trying to figure out how to use AI. I believe the board level needs to be educated about the truth of AI, the good and the bad. The people on the ground needs to have the basic knowledge. Not that we need them, for example, to program in agentic AI, but they must be ready to receive what is being so-called implemented top-down. And of course, as you all know, there need to be governance. Without governance, you will not be able to move or even move further. And last but not least, I still believe that there has to be strategy, because there are different schools of thoughts, there are different ways of doing. The strategy allows the company to move in one direction, and with the strategy, then can you have certain plans? Of course, as you all know, plans will continue to change given that the technology changes.
Thanks. I think that's a good perspective. I'm conscious I didn't introduce myself, so let me give just 2 words about where I'm coming from. I work in corporate venturing. I spend most of my time on what does the next venture look like. I work with venture capitalists. I work with corporate venturing infrastructure and ecosystems. I work with incubators, accelerators, and the whole sort of maritime ecosystem in terms of how do we get set for the future. And one of the things that I've seen at least let me start with a reflection is big problems attract smart people attract money. Shipping has a lot of big problems. And a lot of those big problems are beginning to attract more and more smart people. And a lot of those smart people are actually attracting money from outside maritime. We're seeing money divert from maybe some of the other previous verticals, I'm not going to name any, going into, let's say, this digitalization layer. The AI layer is really exploding. So I think there's obviously something there. And I was conscious, Patrick, you wanted to raise your microphone. You were about to say something.
Well, I was going to say we have smart people too, because I wasn't sure where you were going with that. But I think, there are tons of great use cases in maritime, and whether you're thinking about operational efficiency or decarbonization or your maintenance strategies or port operations or your training of people, like it's everywhere, right? You can see it everywhere. And so, even at ABS, when we started to contemplate, where do we take our smart people and where do we put our money, it becomes how do I differentiate between like all these different opportunities? And so that becomes its own interesting challenge in its own right. And if you don't see it that way, then I'd be happy to talk. There's lots to go do. I think the naval architect in me personally likes to focus on the vessel. The vessel is a great place where there's lots of data, and it's kind of its own contained ecosystem that has its own challenges. And I think we can make the most difference to the seaman by looking there. But certainly an argument can be made to say, no, you start with the people. Or you start with the company's bottom line and the finances. Or you start with your rules, class society. You have 30,000 pages of rules. Can we make that easier to digest, please? Yes, a large language model is great at doing that. We'll make that available. So it's an industry that has lots of opportunity, and I think because of that, it attracts smart people and it attracts money to go invest.
I'm glad you touched on a lot of those points. We've got questions flooding in. Thank you very much, audience. Let's make sure we're touching on some of these. You talked a lot about the use cases, and for everybody in the panel, is there like a hero use case that you want to kick off with, or that you've seen other success with, for anybody? But maybe start with you, Patrick, if you've seen one.
So, I think I just kind of touched on it, but, as Matthew in the opening remarks from BV commented, what gets me up in the morning is focused on a future that is a condition-based class future, where we drive safety to not an annual periodic survey set, but a continuum, right? And so that's a really interesting one for us in ABS, but there are certainly many.
Yeah, so on our side, we are using AI on Fleet Center. We have deployed since a few years Fleet Center. We have 3 Fleet Centers in the world to cover the fleet for 24/7. And indeed, we are using AI for weather routing, which is safety, basically, and also fuel optimization, so CO2 emissions. And we see the improvement in the consumption. So AI is analyzing all the fleet, so all the 400 and even the 300 more vessels chartered, and is providing to we have 4 people in the Fleet Center, and they are providing help, support, sending alarms. So coming back to what AI is expected to be in the future is really a augmented reality, help, support to decision. When something happens, you have a choice. You can, maybe you can do this, you can do that, but after the captain decide, whoever is in charge will still decide. So on our side of Fleet Center, we managed to reduce the number of people in front of the screen, monitoring 700 vessels, and reducing the emission, reducing the consumption.
So I want to stay with you for 1 second because there's a question that's come up which I really, really like. Okay, and it's now moved. Oh, there we go. In the realm of AI, and bearing in mind you've got a large fleet, obviously a very diverse workforce across many geographies, in the realm of AI, is it more strategically sound to be a first mover or a fast follower? What is your sort of position that you think CMA takes?
On our side, we like to be first movers. In decarbonization, in AI, we have partnership with Google, but we are not alone. We have partners. We have strong partners. I was mentioning Google. We have working with a startup in France, Mistral AI. And as first movers, then we try to develop our program. Because one of the big challenges also with AI is, well, this morning the DPM was mentioning, was talking about connectivity. It's connectivity between also all the modules, all the process, all the systems that we have in the organization. Sometimes you can, if you are, let's say, a kind of follower, you might end up with a very nice product that has been developed with one company, a specific one, fantastic, but that doesn't communicate with your organization. And then you are, I mean, you will spend time and maybe money to adapt and for it to communicate. On our side, it's not 100% easy, but definitely it helps to build all our one ecosystem.
Shakib, I'm going to come to you in 1 second, Shakib. Just give me 1 second. I want to ask TS something because there's a question come up. You can see these questions flowing in fast and furious. TS, there's a specific question around roles. And previously, I remember that there was a lot of work done by MPA as well as some of the other Singapore stakeholders around job redesign, around the role descriptors, etc. Now with, you know, keeping in mind sort of the focus of SSA towards making sure that the skill sets are right and we can help to support in the upskilling and reskilling, how do we connect the dots on what, you know, how do you attract talent, what kind of roles actually stay and what roles don't stay? I mean, is this something that you guys think about a little bit?
Sorry, so you're saying about how roles would change?
Yes.
Well, we talked about reskilling and upskilling, right? There is no upskilling now because apart from the tech boys, none of us know AI to start with, so everyone is being reskilled. But then after you are reskilled, you have the knowledge to use AI, then you upskill the job. So to me, you reskill in order to upskill for more sophisticated job.
Wow. Shakib, I'm going to change gears. I'm going to ask you a question which, I don't know, I know you'll answer it, but it's a tough question. We're seeing, you know, we talk a lot about data infrastructure and the ability to, you know, structure data and so on and so forth, but we're also seeing a world where data privacy is getting complex. We're seeing a world where there seems to be some element of geopolitics coming into technology stacks. There's a little bit of consideration around which technology do you use, why, how, where does it come from, and so on and so forth. How do maritime players, should maritime players be worried about that? Or how should maritime players think about partnerships and navigating this super complex space?
Okay, thank you for that, Nakul.
You're very welcome.
We should ask that question to ABS. I'm kidding. Huh? So, what I'm seeing is that clearly geopolitics have an impact in everything we do strategically. So, I'm starting to see a shift, understanding this is early and pieces are moving, a shift from global platforms to regional ecosystems. And I do not think that trend is going to stop. I believe it's going to continue. So the key today for top technology people in organizations is to not to figure out what is the right technology or the best technology, but how to make sure you don't get trapped in the wrong ecosystem, because that would dramatically limit you. That, however, is not simple a decision for the CTIO or the information technology department. This is a corporate strategic decision, and people should be thinking about that right now.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Patrick.
yeah, I'd like to add on. So there, Shakib is right. We're seeing a lot of differentiation between East and West from pure AI models. But shipping is a global business, and shipping standards are global standards. And I think between data and between standards, that's the bridge to make something continuous, even though if you have different fractional AI models at play. And the way we think about things at ABS and the way we talk to our clients is, yeah, you can get sewn into big, expensive systems, but that's more on the data side, I think, than it is on the analytics side. And I think there is opportunity to evolve. And I think if you want to think about that from an East versus West or a regionalization of the tool, that's fine. But I would suggest that you do that from a pace of technology anyway, right? So it's not so much just because of regionalization of a particular model. It's the growth and expansion of the capabilities of that model and its competitors in a particular region that you also have to account for. And so you'll probably have to make a hard choice on data and how you manage that. ERPs, PLMs, you name it. But once you put an agent or just an AI model on top of it, you can be probably fairly flexible with that.
That's interesting, because one of the things that we sort of look at, particularly in the early stage space, is what kind of decisions have easy U-turns, and what kind of decisions are you stuck with for a long time?
Yeah.
And I think that's really the differentiation here and optionality, I think.
And one of the we have a really great tool inside the ABS firewall, and we just keep adding models to it so that we can pick Grok, or we can pick OpenAI, or we can pick Claude. And so, we're stacking them rather than picking them.
Okay, that's interesting. So let me ask both from a class perspective, Lloyd's and ABS. You guys have done a lot of work. I saw headlines from both class societies around sort of this expansion of the AI topic, how you're helping customers, and so on and so forth. What has the take-up been on the customer side? Because we've heard a little bit about the pilots and the challenges, and obviously you guys are layering a lot of stuff.
Sure.
But how is that looking? What does the distribution look like?
Do you want to go first?
Okay, fine. It's mixed. There is a big mix. One of the things that we do in Lloyd's Register is we help our partners create a roadmap and understand where they are. And what we are finding is that the maturity level in different organizations is extremely different. Even within the organization, you have different departments with completely different maturity levels. So we are seeing interest, but we have a high level of complexity, because that maturity level, what that really means is that many companies have numbers of legacy systems that have been there forever. And one of the biggest questions I think technologists will be asking in the next 2-3 years is, do we spend the next 2 years fixing legacy systems and data silos, or do we recreate it on the side new? Which one makes the most sense? And it's different for different companies, but that question is going to become very popular in the next couple of years, even if you have not heard it yet.
Yeah, so yes, and we're seeing the same. Lots of peaks, lots of different perspectives. For ABS, the U.S. government was one of the earlier adopters of the technology, so that was a good advantage for us. Like I said, we started some of this pre-COVID era. But I think, now whether it's helping customers understand their data or what model to choose, I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to the use case, right? If we can help our clients with a good use case, then we can move the needle, and we have good uptake and good engagement.
Another interesting question on the screen here and I'll open this to anybody who might have this example. Are there any examples of a use case which you've seen been able to be compared with AI versus without AI, and what does the benefit look like? Is it a time thing or an accuracy thing, or do you have any example where you sort of layered AI and just seen, okay, this is better or this is worse?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I'm talking too much, but one of the earliest ones we did was looking at noon reports, and I had a staff of about 6 people that would read these for a particular subset of our fleet that was a condition-based fleet. We developed a natural language solution, and we employed that agent on top of it, and we went from 6 people working on this all the time to 1 person working on it a few hours a month. So it was dramatic. It was dramatic, and I could take those other 6 people, and they could start working on the next generation of a condition-based solution for class. So certainly we can see big impacts. That's what you should expect with a technology like this.
Indeed. Any other examples? Anybody? No? Okay, let's go back a little bit to the sort of the human side of it, and we talked a little bit about it's not upskilling, it's literally reskilling for everybody almost. We went through a phase in the industry and still do of seeing a lot more data scientists being recruited, seeing a lot more of these other roles being recruited. We talked about the necessity to have a outcome in mind, have a strategy. We talked a little bit about, okay, you've got to start small. You've got to allow people to start the exploration within certain frameworks in order to be able to move forward. But let's talk about the people thing, because there's a massive generational shift also taking place. I mean, all of you wonderful people are still very, young and capable, but at the same time also have a lot of experience behind you, including me. So when we see this generational shift and we're out in the talent market and we're trying to recruit people, obviously there's a big topic about, okay, why is this an exciting space? We're not going to debate on whether it's an exciting space or not, but I'm just wondering whether a lot of the things we think about from a reskilling perspective is a generational issue rather than it being a training or kind of a structural issue. And in the next 3 to 5 years, that automatically gets addressed because of this generational shift. And I just wonder whether we're solving a problem that isn't necessarily a problem with the way AI is propagated in, let's say, the consumer world. Do we see that starting to happen in the business world?
Well, I'm happy to go. So, first of all, I don't think you train tools. It's too hard because they change too fast. You have to change process, and you have to kind of teach in a different mindset. When I talk to my team, I encourage them all to have an AI app on their phone and be using it, whether it's the app within ABS firewalls, we call Sierra, or whether it's something else. That's where you start to change mindset. And I think, kind of circling back to, when I thought about this panel, yeah, there's a ton of hype around AI, but AI isn't all about hype. It isn't all hype. There's something there. But it's not a silver bullet either. It's not going to be a cure-all, and it doesn't replace what a human can do on a vessel with their eyes and their hands and their mind, right? It's a data tool, and it's a way to extract information more quickly, and it's about reducing administrivia, as we call it, or administrative functions, and produce that safety manual faster, produce that noon report faster. But the reason that you're a surveyor is to be on the vessel with your hands and your feet looking at things, not writing a report for 2 hours. If you can take the report writing for 2 hours out, you can maximize your time being a great surveyor on the vessel. That's all good stuff. And that's something that the survey workforce, or whomever you're talking, you find the right example for the right person, right? But they can bring that inside and say, okay, I understand that my value isn't that I'm really great at writing reports. My value is being a great surveyor. And AI is going to help me write reports. It is going to alleviate my workload. And that's how you get adoption. And that's how you to manage change for such a technology that's so disruptive.
Francois, what about yourself? Do you have Google Gemini or ChatGPT or something like that on your phone that you use?
Yeah, we have Copilot. We have, in fact, I have to say, the past few years we changed quite a few times because some were not adequate or were only for one part of the region. So it was, I have to say, a bit confusing. But yeah, we have a Copilot that is only for work, taking data only from secure data, verified data, or Copilot Open. But what we see in the young generation is that first, when you present AI, is that it allows to attract some talent. I don't know if it's a hype, but for sure they are more interested if they see that the company is more willing forward to move toward more digitalization using AI and moving forward. So what we see is that they start to have a different mindset. They have a way to use the tools, the IT tools, or a smartphone in a way that I'm incapable of doing it. Even I see my kids, my son is doing things that super fast on a smartphone, and I'm still stuck with my, I guess, old mindset, and I still my process, which is long and so on. So we see that they can bring new things, this new talents, and they can help us change our process and adapt to this AI.
Of course, and with all of the other considerations we talked about. With about a minute on the clock, we're going to start with UTS, and then we're going to go around. Hype or game changer, and like 3 or 4 words on why. Hype or game changer?
I need a few more words. AI can speak to you today. AI can think. AI literally have empathy, solves, create. It is itself can invent. In fact, AI is going to be an infinite inventor. With all this, we are the one that's going to be limit. We are the one that will limit what can be done. So to me, it's still going to be a game changer. But we have to really understand what it is and what can be done.
So game changer, but humans restricted. Jakib.
100% game changer, but it's also hyped in many aspects. But it will definitely change the way we work, period.
Yeah, hype is what you see on the surface, but if you go deep, you can have game changer, definitely.
Iceberg.
Yeah, what should I say? Oh, it's game changer. But you got to start with the end in mind. If you start with the end in mind, then you can, in fact, change the game.
Fantastic. Excellent discussions. I think it was very candid. We were able to address quite a few questions that came in. If there are any more, of course, I'm sure these gentlemen are around. We can ask again. From my perspective, absolute game changer. 12 months from now, or roughly about 12 months from now, when we're sitting at the next 21st edition of Singapore Maritime Week, I'm pretty sure AI is going to be front and center, and it's going to be actually quite dramatic in terms of what's being implemented. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think the panelists deserve a round of applause.
Thank you, Mr. Malhotra, and all the panelists.